Hello, and you're very welcome to today's training session, where I will be discussing the launch of the new National Financial Regulations. Just before I begin, I just want to give you some information as to why the National Financial Regulations were updated. So the NFR rewrite project was part of the Internal Controls Improvement 3-year programme. So what that consisted of was a number of different work streams, and each of those work streams were designed to improve the HSE system of internal controls. The HSE is required to have an effective system of internal control just to ensure that they're complying with all statutory and governance obligations. It's designed to manage and reduce risk just to ensure that the assets of the HSE are safeguarded, transactions are authorised and properly recorded, and it's also designed then just to ensure that appropriate protocols and policies are in place. The NFRs are in effect the HSE's financial system of internal control, and if they're complied with, they will provide trust and confidence in the organisation's financial information. As part of the Internal Controls Improvement Programme, there are a number of different work streams, and one of those work streams was to rewrite the NFRs. By rewriting the National Financial Regulations, that would hopefully strengthen the HSE's internal controls and compliance levels by improving staff awareness of the role that they play in safeguarding the HSE's resources. So the launch of the new NFRs is of huge relevance and value to the HSE, so your attendance and your attention today is very much appreciated. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, I will be covering a lot of content today, mainly focusing on how to navigate through the new NFR documents. So I will be focusing on how to interpret checklists, diagrams and icons that you will see across the NFRs. I will also be providing explanations of the types of supplementary documents available to you. In addition then, I will also be providing information relating to the change control process. Towards the latter half, I will highlight some key high-level differences between the old NFRs and the new NFRs. Firstly, what are national financial regulations? So they're a set of policy documents which set out the financial controls for the organisation. They are not meant to be detailed procedure documents for financial processes or activities, as these are contained within your local procedures. But the aim of the NFRs is to provide high-level controls to guide your local procedures. Secondly, why is this particular training important? It's important that all staff are aware of the controls and that they follow them. Also, given the changes to the presentation and the layout of the NFRs to support greater accessibility of the documents, it's necessary to provide you with guidance on how to understand and navigate through the documents. Then lastly, just to note the loudspeaker symbol on the right. This is used to highlight specific attention to a training slide or object. You will see it used throughout the NFRs, and it's just to highlight critical items. Just moving on then to what you will learn from this training. So I'm going to show you how to actually access the NFRs, provide tips on how to easily navigate the documents in both PDF and web browsers, provide clarity on how to understand the checklists, diagrams and icons that you will see across the NFRs. I will also focus on what sections are common across the NFR documents and their purpose. I will also provide information on the types of supplementary documents that are available to you. A change control process has also been developed, so I will give you some information on this also. So that's the context set. Now let's look at the document framework itself. So the NFR-A document covers the internal controls framework and principles. So it consists of the overarching principles, governance and general controls of the NFRs. The B documents are broken out into 7 separate areas and they're intended to be operational regulations, which are very much aimed for practical audiences. They deal with topics such as procurement, travel and subsistence, payroll and property and equipment. There are 2 C documents and they mainly relate to custodian regulations, including PPP, RISMAC and supported banking. The last NFR is the NFR-D document, and that focuses on financial reporting, so mainly around the creation of the annual financial statements. So there's 11 NFRs now in total. Moving on to an important question which discusses who is the actual target audience of the NFRs. In short, the NFRs have a very broad reach. They apply to all permanent, temporary and agency staff of all HSE divisions, CHOs, hospital groups where services are provided on behalf of the HSE, and Section 38 and 39 providers where services are being provided on behalf of the HSE, or where the HSE grant aid and funding is being received. Then just to note, as flagged by the loudspeaker symbol icon, each NFR contains an introduction, and an at-a-glance page, which outlines the key users of each document. So the next few slides will discuss the overall look and feel and presentation of the NFRs. And this is important because they have undergone a significant transformation. I'm going to start with cover pages first. So each NFR has a cover page, and that includes the name of the document, the category reference, for example B1, B5, a distinct colour for each group of the NFRs, so for example the B documents have a blue theme, the version number, and the effective date. So the effective date outlines when the version came into use, which is important as there will be specific change control processes to be followed, which I'll touch on later. So the second and third pages of each NFR is a document overview. At the top of the page, it outlines the main topics that are covered in the document. Underneath that, it notes who needs to read the policy. The next paragraph covers the change control process, so how the document is kept up to date and how any changes are processed. There is also a piece at the bottom of the page that provides guidance should a local procedure need to be set up. There is also a very useful button that is included on each page of the NFRs, which allows you to revert back to the table of contents. This will help you navigate through the documents. Lastly then, there is an FAQ link included at the bottom of this page where you can find answers to some of the most common queries related to the NFRs. Another feature of the new NFRs are these icons, which can be seen throughout the documents. Their purpose is to catch the reader's attention and emphasize important information such as highlighting critical information, flagging that a form can be downloaded, referring the reader to contact details, and making the user aware specific text contains legal references. Next, we'll look at how best to navigate the NFRs. So it's fairly self-explanatory, but just to highlight some shortcuts when you are actually in the table of contents. So the table of contents is interactive, so you should be able to click on any section in the table of contents and it will bring you to that particular section within the NFR. If you're opening the NFR in Google Chrome and would like to open links to other documents and external links in another browser, you can right-click over the section you wish to open and select Open in New tab. Please take note of these shortcuts as it will make it much easier to navigate through the NFRs. After the document overview section of the new NFRs, there's an at-a-glance section. And the reason why it's called at-a-glance is because it intends to provide an overview of the main topics and key information included in the document. Specifically, it covers an overview of document contents, who the key users are, so it outlines which employees will be the most frequent users of the NFR. It also covers what the key concepts are. It covers the key objectives, so what the purpose of the NFR is. The at-a-glance page shows you the key relevant links found throughout the document. And lastly then, the key contacts. In the case of general document queries, you can contact the Governance and Compliance team. If your query relates to a specific subject, all relevant contact details can be found in this section of the NFR. So the at-a-glance section is very useful and it provides a snapshot of the document highlights and it could be used to identify the key elements without actually digging into the detail of the document. The next important section in each NFR document are the checklists. What these checklists do is they provide staff with an outline of every step that they must follow in a given process or task which is referenced in the NFR. For example, as shown in the picture on the right-hand side, where a member of staff is placing an order over the phone, there are 4 steps that they must follow. This will help ensure staff know what to do in certain situations and support greater compliance and consistency of application. The new documents also contain some Visio diagrams to depict process maps like the one shown here on the right. The idea here is to visualize a process in a step-by-step manner from start to end. Each of the shapes represent a place in the process as shown in the next slide. A Visio can be read from left to right or from top to bottom, with each of the steps represented by an arrow. As I said, the Visio shapes represent a place in the process. The shape with rounded sides is a start or end point. The square shape represents a typical step in a process. The diamond shape is where there is a decision point. Moving on to links now. So the new NFR documents also contains a number of internal and external links, which enables the reader to be redirected to an external site where they can find more information, or jump within the document itself. This is highlighted here in the picture on the right-hand side. Another key feature of the new NFRs is a glossary of terms. Most people would have come across these with other documents, but it's really a list of terms which have appeared in the document and what they mean, structured in an alphabetical order. And again, the purpose is to make the NFRs more user-friendly and easier to understand. Of course, no document would be complete without acronyms and abbreviations. To ensure there's no confusion, each of the new NFRs will contain a table listing out all acronyms and abbreviations relevant to that specific NFR. In the NFRs, the full word will be used at first, followed by the abbreviation in brackets. Then thereafter, the abbreviation will be used throughout the remaining NFR. The next feature is to highlight the key control checklist. This is different to the previous checklist which we saw, as that consisted of the list of key steps which staff must perform when completing a given process or task. This is a key control checklist, and what it does is it highlights the key controls located within the NFR. For example, NFR B6, which deals with Section 38 and 39 arrangements, has a key control that all funding is recorded on the SPG system, along with many others. Crucially, it's important to note that the key control checklist is a supplementary document to the NFR, and it should never be used as a substitute for the actual NFR itself. A link to the key control checklist is provided within each NFR, and each local area should ensure that they have these key controls in place. It's broken down in a little more detail on the next slide. This is an extract from the B6 key control checklist. The risk column here on the left identifies the type of risk arising if there's no control in place. So it might be a risk of fraud or a conflict of interest risk, for example. The key control column identifies the key control that must be in place. The section reference then tells us where the key control is within the NFR document, so what section it's in the NFR. It may refer to one particular section or a couple of different sections that relate to the specific control. The column marked preventative or detective informs us as to whether the control is aimed at preventing an error or detecting one. The frequency of control column informs us how often the control is implemented, so this could be on a transactional basis, weekly or monthly. So as I said, the key control checklist highlights the key controls located within each NFR. Moving on to the change control procedure. So with any important set of documents such as the NFRs, there needs to be a robust process which is followed, so that changes which are proposed go through the appropriate approval channels. Here, the starting point for any change to the documents is the completion of a change request form. An example of this is shown on the right-hand side. A link to the change request form can be found within each NFR, and it can also be accessed on the NFR website itself. Once the form is submitted, it will be considered by the appropriate channels of review, beginning with the governance and compliance team reviewing the initial request. So there are the main key features of the new NFRs. So hopefully with the additional checklists, diagrams, icons, internal and external links, you will find them helpful as you navigate through the documents. This slide here just gives you the link of where you can find the new NFRs, so they can be accessed here by clicking on this link. It's really important that if you are opening the NFRs, that you open them in Google Chrome, as that will give you additional functionality which you may find useful, so just bear that in mind when you are actually opening the NFRs. It's important we touch on how the NFRs and IFMS, the Integrated Financial Management System, will relate to one another. IFMS will be rolled out across the local areas on a phased basis. To facilitate this, there may be particular sections within the NFRs that will have two versions, one for areas where IFMS is in use and a second for areas where it is not in use. It will be clearly outlined in the document where this is the case. For example, once the IFMS rollout begins, the NFR guidance on approving purchase orders may look like this example below. If your local area is using IFMS, you will follow the yes path, and if not, you will follow the no path. So just keep an eye out for this when IFMS rollout begins. The last section I just want to focus on is a summary of the key changes from the old NFRs to the new NFRs. The intention is to summarise the most important and relevant changes, and not to provide an exhaustive list. Given the NFRs have been revised, it's been necessary to make a number of changes, amending certain items, removing some controls, and adding in new controls as well. So we'll just go through these now for each of the NFRs. So across all of the NFRs, titles of roles have been updated. So there was a lot of references to old job titles in the previous NFRs. So these have all been updated across all the NFRs just to make them as relevant as possible. Firstly, looking at the NFR B1 Procurement NFR. So there has been a couple of changes from the old NFRs to the new NFRs. The distinction between routine and non-routine expenditure has been removed across the document. So you might recall on the NFR1 expenditure table that it was broken down into routine and non-routine. So the non-routine column has now been removed. So the authorization levels for routine expenditure that were included in NFR1 are now the authorization thresholds in NFR B1. Following on from that, the distinction in the approval thresholds for voluntary and not-for-profit expenditure has also been removed. So the thresholds are now uniform for all types of expenditure. Previous references to the Capital Projects Approval Protocol that was included in NFR1 is now in a handoff document to the Capital Projects Manual and Approvals Protocol. So what this does is it acts as a toolkit on how to deliver capital projects in the capital plan and sets out rules to appraise, start, manage and administer all capital projects. The prompt payment sections that were in NFR1 have been overhauled. Information has been included in NFR B1 on PPI, however there is now a handoff to the prompt payment of interest policy. Reference to the 4002 non-compliance reporting has been amended. Instead now the NFR states that self-assessments should be carried out. Finally then, all references to consultants are now in a handoff to Guidelines for the Engagement of Consultants and Other External Support by the Civil Service 2006. This change affects previous items in the old NFRs, including provisions on business case approval, the procurement process and contract management. Next we'll cover B2, Income Charges and Debtors. Again there was a couple of key changes to flag. There is additional information included in the new B2 NFR regarding nursing home charges, so the excess over the Nursing Home Support Scheme Fair Deal contribution. Part of the HSE's role is to determine the financial co-payment arrangement between nursing homes and individual members. In the previous NFR it was acute based only, so that has been updated in the new NFR B2. There has been an addition of a new control to reflect a new regulation. The regulation relates to the charging of non-ordinarily resident inpatients and non-EU nationals ordinarily resident in Ireland, which is a tax-related concept. Basically, the number of days a person has been living in the country for any given year will impact their tax status. All staff involved in income charging and collection should be aware of the regulation. In the new NFRs, there is additional detail provided with regards to the procedures for referrals to debt collection agencies, and this is following extensive SME and IFMS discussions. There has also been an overhaul of the appropriate legal proceedings around collection of unpaid debts, and that includes a handoff to the OLS at hse.ie. Another additional piece that was added was around additional advice on the Residential Support Services Maintenance and Accommodation Contribution, RISMAC, including a handoff to the RISMAC guidelines. This advice is in relation to RISMAC maintenance and accommodation costs and the administration of this. The previous NFR had no reference to this. The last change to highlight is the addition of details specific to dealing with vulnerable or at-risk adults as it relates to debt collection. The previous NFR had no reference to this, so this additional information is included in section 2.5 of the NFR. With regard to the document B3, Employee Administration and Payroll, there has been a couple of key changes from the old NFRs to the new NFR. There has been a change in the procedures for the recoupment of overpayments. Now where the overpayment is below €500 gross, the amount is recovered in the next payroll run. This threshold was €200 in the previous NFR. Where the overpayment is over €500 gross, a letter is issued to the employee, and again this threshold was €200 in the previous NFR. Also, the maximum deduction in one payroll run increased from 15% to 20% of fortnightly salary. There are additional requirements included in B3, where each HSE area, HR and payroll division must ensure that there is a documented payroll plan for continued operations that exists in the event of a disaster or emergency. With regards to leave and pay scales, there was a lot of information in the old NFR3 document, but this has now been removed and it has been replaced with a handoff to the employee handbook. There has also been an addition of a table which has HR form links, and that includes the forms, deadlines, and where to send the forms, so this would be particularly useful for staff. The last change then is that budget holders should conduct timely reviews of relevant payroll reports to monitor for overpayments and underpayments. There has also been additional changes to the B4 travel and subsistence document. So you may see alternative phrasing being used to describe the relevant motor rate applicable to staff on detached duty. So the new B4 document references reduced rates in line with Deeper Circular 1182. In the old NFR5, it mentioned that the HSE had to be mentioned on the insurance documents. Now it's acceptable for the insurance documents to say HSE or employer. The approval of travel and subsistence documents, approval to travel, and the final approval of T&S claims are the responsibilities of line managers. In the old NFR, the requirement was for it to be a grade 8 or equivalent salary scale or above. However, this requirement has been removed, so once it's a line manager of any grade, this is sufficient. We've also included references to NISRP's HSE, HR and payroll self-service system, and its use, I suppose, where applicable throughout the NFR. Previously, this wouldn't have been mentioned in the NFR. Finally then, links to the most recent travel rates are included in the NFR, and these will be updated on a continuous basis where applicable. In terms of NFR B5, which deals with banking, cash and card payments, again there has been a couple of amendments. The first key change to flag is the additional detail which has been added to the section dealing with the cash management process, which references various corporate procedures for cash drawdown. There is also a handoff now to this to the Treasury SOP. There has also been an amendment to the language and phrasing in the sections on banking policies and opening bank accounts. This is derived from the change in the vote and the HSE board who can now make banking decisions. Also, there is no longer stipulations around public accounts and depositories. There are also increased controls for new cash collection locations, which are included in section 9.2.1. The old NFR 13 did touch on this briefly, but now there are more controls around the specific area. There is a change to a control regarding petty cash, so petty cash accounts should be reviewed and closed if they have not been used in 12 months. There is also additional information included on what can now be purchased online, so things like online grocery shopping, online motor vehicle tax, TV licenses, etc. So these can be found in section 2.1 of the new NFR B5. NFR B6 is on section 38 and 39 arrangements, and the main changes were as follows. So there's been an amendment to the section on performance management previously contained in NFR 31. This is now a handoff to the detailed procedural guidance which is set out in the HSE Governance Framework Manual, a copy of which can be requested from compliance@hse.ie. In the new B6 NFR, there is also an additional reference to the SPG, or Special Provider Governance System, when recording, funding and granting arrangements. This concept replaces the funding register and includes specific controls in respect of managing documentation. As with the new NFR B1, there is also a removal of the distinction between routine and non-routine expenditure. Similarly for NFR B7, property and equipment, there has been a couple of key changes. So there's been an amendment to the section around the HSE's right to ensure that property owned by third-party organisations is used for its intended purpose, for which the funding was actually advanced. The additional detail covers the HSE's rights, such as being able to enforce a sale to recoup the capital investment or the acquisition of land, etc. There has also been an amendment to the section around the HSE's options in terms of assisting an organisation to acquire its land, building or facilities. A high-level table is now in place to replace the extensive detail. It is also advised that property@hse.ie is contacted for advice, given it is a complex area. Thirdly, the removal of the specific control to perform routine inspection of high-risk assets. NFR-A covers the security of high-risk assets, however it does not cover routine inspection of it, as this has been removed relative to the old NFR. There are additional requirements provided around the appropriate information and level of detail contained within the fixed asset register. There has also been an amendment to the capital thresholds, so only assets with an acquisition cost of more than €10,000, inclusive of VAT, for individual assets can be capitalised, and no grouping of assets is permitted as per DEPR Circular 2120. This applies to all asset types, whether revenue or capital funded, and is effective from the 1st of January 2022. NFR C1 relates to patients' private property and finances. Again, there has been a couple of key changes. Firstly, there has been an amendment to the provision that a HSE client representative cannot act as a signatory on the local patient private property account. This provision now states that all such accounts require 2 signatories without stopping the HSE client representative from acting as a signatory. The language used to assess and determine the capacity of a client has also been updated in the new C1 NFR. While there's been no control changes, there has been significant changes to the terminology used. There are additional lines of detail added to the controls surrounding patient private property accounts and banking. This includes ensuring that there is a custodian designated by the CHO Head of Finance. NFR C2 covers community residents' finances. The most important changes to highlight are as follows. Information has been added relating to financial abuse or exploitation, so it's important that HSE staff are vigilant to any abuse or exploitation of service users, including financial abuse or exploitation. If there are any concerns relating to the abuse or exploitation of a service user, it should be referred to the relevant safeguarding team. Secondly, there's been an amendment to the section dealing with instances where supported banking is not an option. Now it's suggested that a patient private property account is the most appropriate option, and there's a handoff to the PPP guidelines. Thirdly, controls around community resident managers having the responsibility to remain informed of insurance cover relating to cash handling at their location is now covered with a handoff to the NFR B5 document. There's also been an amendment to the requirement that local finance sections will need to be notified on an ongoing basis of new direct debit setups. This has been changed to the General Manager Finance Specialist needing to be notified of this. Supported banking is a key addition to the C2 document, which was not addressed in the original NFR. It's covered in section 1.6 of NFR C2 and states that we should encourage clients to hold separate bank accounts to manage their personal funds. And if they need help to operate these accounts, local areas should put in place robust procedures to safeguard both the client and the HSE from exposure to avoidable risk. NFRD is on financial reporting, and the key changes are as follows. The threshold for losses of special payments which require a note in the appropriation account is now set at €30,000 and will require finance sanction through the Department of Health. The section dealing with emergency issues and the requirement to be supported by a signed requisition has been removed. There is an additional controller item dealing with stock valuation. The new NFR states that the only method to be followed for value in stock is the lower of cost or net realisable value, as per FRS 102. The language for conducting a physical count has been simplified and put into a flowchart, so hopefully you should find this useful. Write-off approvals should now be obtained at the location, i.e. the head of service, head of finance or hospital group CFO, and not the ACFO's finance specialist. They are reported to AFS and the ACFO for consolidation of the letter of sanction and subsequent Department of Health approval, but not the ACFO approval. So they are the main high-level key differences between the old and the new NFRs. If you want a full breakdown of all changes, this can be requested by emailing the Governance and Compliance team on govn.compliance@hse.ie. So that brings me to the end of the training session. I hope you found it useful. I really hope you find the new NFRs a lot easier to navigate through and find the information that you need. As I mentioned, there is a change control process in place, so if you are reading through the NFRs and feel something needs to be amended or changed, please send it through to us and we will consider the change and discuss with relevant parties. I just want to take the opportunity as well just to thank everyone who has contributed to the successful completion of the NFRs. And if anyone has any questions, as I said, you could drop us an email on govn.compliance@hse.ie. Thank you.